Applause for our first-time guests. We are so happy that you are here. Welcome home. And last week we began a conversation that was birthed in the pursuit of answering a question, was I born to be miserable? And we went on a quest to understand this question and why a human being would ever begin to ask that question. Why in the world would somebody ask, am I miserable? Except that sometimes in life hits us so hard, and sometimes the unfathomable, the things of our nightmares, they materialize and affect us. Then sometimes the worst realities, the worst possibilities come true. Have you ever had an experience in your life that you just dreamt of and that you wished, that you hoped you would not have to experience, but it came true? I think that's like part of the human dilemma, the human story. That horrible things happen to people. And it doesn't matter if you consider yourself a good person. It doesn't even matter if you consider yourself a bad person. If you are a human being, the truth is that the experience of living life on earth is full of traumatic and painful and hurtful tragic moments. And when it continuously happens in our life, what we begin to question is God against me? Like, I gave my life to God. I've decided to follow God. I've decided to be faithful to the things that He's entrusted me with, but somehow, some way, I'm still found dealing with deep issues. And I've had so many friends from many different walks of lives and perspectives and ideas about what the world is all about, which, by the way, buddy, you're one of those. Where we discuss issues that we don't have real answers to, but there is this solace, there is this comfort in knowing that although we go through tragedies and difficult moments, that God has empathy for the human soul. And every individual that I've met that has been my friend has, at some point in their life, struggled with great and deep depression that has stolen the colors and the beauty of life. And what I've realized in my life is sometimes, although we go through tragic and hurtful experiences, the comfort of my soul, the solace of my soul, what allows me to walk through the darkest of spaces in life is knowing that God cares for what I'm feeling. That God has empathy for my soul. And so we can sometimes summarize our life and think this is a tragic, miserable life. And in church, sometimes we can think God just called us to live miserable lives. And if that's you this morning, I want to let you know that God did not call you to have a miserable life. God called you to experience heaven on earth, which is life with Him. And if that sounds like a delusional thought, an elusive thought, heaven is when we die, then my hope is by the end of this conversation, you would see a glimpse into what having a life with God on earth really, truly feels like. Because you know what I realized? Heaven wouldn't be heaven if God wasn't in heaven. So that must mean that heaven is wherever God is. And sometimes when we feel the pressures of the world, our escape that doesn't just serve as an escape, but as a battleground, as a fortress, as a place to find restoration and comfort and renewal, is in the presence of God. So on our quest to find the question, was I born to be miserable? We struggled with a lot of different things. And we saw that God loves us. And He created us so that we would enjoy Him. And dare I say that He would enjoy us. And what a dilemma that can be, right? Like, God enjoy me. Like, I don't even enjoy myself. You know, sometimes in my worst moments, I was like, I don't even enjoy being around myself. How could God ever enjoy me? Except that He created us to spend an eternity with us. And it's okay to accept the fact that the God of the universe wants to enjoy you. And oftentimes why we don't think that that's even a possibility in our lives is because we don't even enjoy our own experience. And God doesn't want to take us away from the dilemmas. He doesn't want to take us away from the issues. He wants to show us that there is joy even in the midst of the hardest moments of life. And so we went ahead and we spoke on the story of Job, which is an epic story, a big story with poetic themes that just blow my mind. I wasn't there when the book was written, but man, I really wish I could have been to understand why some of the poetic themes were chosen, why they spoke in such a way, why they were so harsh in their language and sometimes so delightful. And we studied the life of Job, or at least saw an aspect of it. And today, I want to continue that because there is so much material to work with in this story. But I want to dissect this story and take a different approach. I want to be pragmatic a little bit today with you. And you're going to have to bear with me because normally I'm not a teacher. That's Dr. Beto's job. I really don't like to go with points, but you know what impressed upon my soul? Is there was multiple voices surrounding Job. Multiple points of contact that could have inspired him. No, could have encouraged him, could have challenged him in a way that didn't seem demeaning, but breathed life out of him. And we see many voices there, and what I realize is that we're all surrounded by voices. You know, when you're a child, the voice of God sounds like your mom. You know, don't do that. But it's your mom's voice. Is she here? What the heck is going on? And it's so funny that Kevin brought that up earlier because I am the friend that he was talking about. And him and I, we pick up on each other's slang, and it's hilarious considering his slang is so silly. And I catch myself saying things that I was just like, where did that come from? And he was just like, I don't know. You have a great influence over your life, Juan. And my hope in taking this perspective, if you allow me to, is that you would be able to identify the voices in your life that give you life and those that you need to remove that take away from you. Because oftentimes the perspective that we have on God is tainted because of the voices that speak into our lives. God is a manipulative God because the experiences you've had with people are of abuse. God is not fair and he's not kind and he's not loving because the people that have spoken into your life about who God is have been unfair and unloving to you. And oftentimes our perception of who God is more the perception of who we are than what the scriptures actually truly tell us about who he is. And I want you to identify these voices that are found in Job because sometimes what keeps an intervention that is eternal, an intervention from God from happening in our lives is actually the walls that we create around us because of our surroundings being voices that take from us, not give us life. And so today, I believe wholeheartedly that if you can identify the voices that are in your life and you can identify who is speaking into your life, then you will be able to predict the kind of life that you live in the future that you will create. Because it's so interesting. Sociologists have found in so many studies that when you remove a person from their tribe, when you remove a person from a group and you insert them into a new group, they become a new person. Isn't that so weird? I mean, all of us, we want to say, I've never changed. I've always been the same. I've always been real since I was 12. And you should be concerned if you were the same person that you were when you were 12 and now you're 43. You continuously change, and it's no coincidence that when your life experiences expand and grow, and the more people that you meet, the more experiences that you have, the more you change. And so I want us to look at this because sociologists have told us that we are the sum total of the 5 people closest to us. In the case of the Betals, it's like the 7 people closest to you. But the people who surround you, the people who speak life into you, if they speak destruction over your life, you will take on structures of destruction. So who are you listening to? Because what I've learned is that the human connection is actually the soil that God uses to strengthen us and fertilize us and speak into us. If our human connection is broken, then most likely there is no space within our lives to grow and to become the person that God's called us to. So, what are the seeds that are being planted into your life? And here's a better question. What are you planting in other people's lives? So I want to pick up from Job chapter 2. And again, this is the second portion of last week. I wish we could summarize the whole book again in under 15 minutes. But I will die attempting to go ahead and pick up all that information at once. I strongly suggest you to look at last week's video to get some more context. But I want to pick up here because when we think about the voices that are involved in Job's life, we think about his 4 friends. But there's actually one voice that is about 1 sentence long that speaks profoundly about the kind of relationship that he has that is the most personal and deepest relationship that offsets everything. And so in Job chapter 2, verse 9, it says this, and we're coming in hot. His wife said to him, "Are you still maintaining your integrity? Curse God and die." I almost said a Hispanic joke, but I let it go. I let it go. I love Hispanics. I'll just say it. No, I won't say it. I won't say it. You kind of get what I was going to say. It's probably Hispanic. All right, moving on. So, imagine that. The closest voice to you, the one that you trust the most, says this kind of philosophy, this ideal, speaks it over your life. This must have cut so deep in the soul of Job. See, I've been in love. I am in love. And no one can hurt you more than a person that you've entrusted your heart with, in your love with. Nobody's words affect you more than the person that you've committed your life to and shared your deepest, darkest secrets and are your most beautiful moments. And to me, you might look at this moment and say, wow, this lady's cruel. She's cold, heartless. But I think oftentimes we make a judgment on what people say without understanding the context of their life. And what we do in faith spaces oftentimes is that we try to correct a person's behavior, not their intention. We try to correct a person's language, not their character. And a lot of us, when we do discipling, we try to teach people how Jesus talks instead of who Jesus is. And so when you look at the context of her life, you can come to understand this moment a little better. You see, before this moment, her children have died of a natural disaster. We're all Floridians. We've experienced the most horrendous storms that the United States has ever offered. And I remember last year when the hurricane came here, I could just remember all the faces that came in here that were desperate. I remember a girl, I forget her name, but she came in here and she was just crying. I said to her, how are you doing? And she was holding back tears and she said, I'm alone. I lost everything. So many people last year that we talked to, their homes, their houses were destroyed, lost. Could you imagine the pain of losing a child? Could you imagine the pain of losing all your children to a natural disaster? And the guilt and the pain that you would feel, and the question of, God, why did you let this happen? It's one of the biggest questions that people ask. If God is so good, why are there natural disasters? And really what they're asking is if God is so good, why do the innocent die? And so she's here in this moment, broken, filled with anguish and agony so vast that honestly only God could fill. And she approaches Job, and if matters don't get worse, everything that they work for has been stolen and raided. They now don't have as much money as they had. And maybe you can think, if you've been a successful person, you started a business, okay, I've lost the business, I'm gonna mourn, and now I'm gonna create a new one. That's what I love so much about entrepreneurship and people who believe that you have the ability to create, is that no matter what you lose, you can give generously and create because you will always create. But here's the kicker. Job became deathly ill. Sores came all over his body. He was going to die. And so his wife looks at him in agony, frustrated, growing bitter towards God and bitter towards Job. Have you ever done that? No. I'm in the wrong room. Because I have. I've gotten very mad at God. I remember when I was in Colombia, and I remember the first time that I experienced the brutality of humanity at the age of 5. I remember the death threats that my family was receiving and rocks being thrown into my window with notes saying, "You owe us a debt, we're going to murder you if you don't pay it back." I can recall seeing the worst of humanity, things that were completely out of my control. And I can remember the agonizing pain of leaving my life behind and having to start a new life. And so I can only imagine, I don't even want to imagine, as a new dad, what it would feel like to lose a child. So here she is, and this is the only story, or the only voice in the story that encourages Job to curse God and die. Isn't that insane? It makes me want to cry too, dude. And I want to make a pause here. One of the most important decisions you're ever going to make is who you marry. Because who you decide to spend your life with will be indicative of the kind of life you will live. See, I married an incredible woman. You see, when you marry somebody that loves you and that wants the best for you, they will sometimes pull you, other times push you. And when you marry somebody who has their eyes set on God and who He is, they will refuse to let you be an apathetic life. A life that is not of integrity. A life that is lackluster. A life that is all about yourself. When you marry somebody that loves God and that loves you and that wants the best for you, they will challenge you and push you to the limits of your capacity so that you would be more like Jesus and less like who you have been. And I can say in my life that every single time that I've been apathetic, that I didn't believe in myself, every single time that I felt sorry for myself, nobody believed in me more than my wife. And she always pushed me. And when nobody would pray over me, she was praying over me. And when nobody saw me cry, she was watching me cry. And she's watched me cry more than I will ever cry in front of you guys. And she has pulled me and pushed me, and I struggle with apathy sometimes. I'll be honest. What, you're a pastor, what are you doing? Being honest.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Sometimes I grow so tired that I just want to sit down on my sofa and eat chips and watch movies all day. That's a happy life for me. If heaven turns out to be whatever makes you the most happy, that's heaven. And Kara there just looking at me. Will you pay attention to me now? And by the way, she didn't become that when we got married. She was always that person, even while we were dating. And I realize some of you aren't married. Some of you don't even have a date yet. I'm sorry. But I know this. You should take this into consideration. The way that someone talks to you or about you is indicative of what they think of you and who they will be when things get really hard. If who you are dating does not prop you up, does not lead you to live a life more like the life that God intended you to, they will not when everything goes haywire. I've just had extreme luck to marry an incredible human being. And now we have a baby. Yay. So, the first voice that I want to look at is the voice of resentment. Can you identify the voice of resentment? See, a voice that carries resentment comes from a person that has decided to make a moral stance against unacceptable behavior. And in their mind, the way to uphold a moral stance is retaliation. Have you ever wanted to retaliate? No? Man, you guys are perfect. You took that from me, I'm going to take everything that you are. When I was in high school, I was so dramatic, I know, whatever. But when somebody wanted to get in a fight with me, I knew I would lose. Man, boy, I knew, but I would get that one punch in there. You ever felt like that? I would get that one punch that will just make you meet your maker. In the name of Jesus, like, so sacrilege. And so we can think, man, that's really, really dramatic, but when we look at it in a micro-analysis, what we find is that retaliation also looks like in the form of a complaint. Have you ever met anybody who was a complainer? Oh my gosh, complainers, man. I can't do life with you who complains a lot, which is funny considering the fact that I complain too much. It's like an inception of complaining about the complainer. It's crazy. So what I've learned about resentment is that it distributes itself in complaints. It distributes itself in taking because you don't feel like it's fair. When you have a life of resentment, your form of retaliation may be quiet, but boy, is it effective. And you consider yourself highly moral because they did something wrong, so I'm going to get even. And that happens so many times in our lives, and there's so many voices. And what I've learned about resentment, and a person who holds resentment, is actually resentment has a hold of them. Because the only way that resentment can be formed is if there is a space in your life where there is unforgiveness, which is one of the toughest topics to talk about in church. Because if you've been a Christian long enough, you think you've forgiven everyone until the person you haven't forgiven enters your life again. And now all you can do is complain and wish that they were not there, to put it lightly. So, what's dangerous about this voice is that when people try to speak hope into your life, and you are a person that has resentment, you will begin to reject the possibilities that can come from that voice because of the possibility that you will be let down and hurt again. A person who has resentment has a really difficult time reconciling relationships, has a really difficult time even considering how God could reconcile humanity. A person who has resentment would rather disassociate themselves from God than to be part of whatever God is doing because it involves doing life with people. And doing life with people means you are going to be disappointed. As a matter of fact, at the end of this talk, you may very well be disappointed with me because I just didn't explode. We're all going to be met with disappointments in our life. But what are you harboring in your life, and who are you letting speak into your life? That's up to you. So she says, why bother being kind? That's what integrity means, to be good. In some translations, uprighteous, do good things, kind. So why be even kind when God has been unkind with you? Why bother to give generously when you don't receive generously? And where we find ourselves when we listen to the voice of resentment is bargaining self-preservation over others' needs. We rather preserve ourselves. And I want to dive a little deeper into why she said that a little bit later. It'll connect. But for her to dismiss Job and to dismiss God in a way in her mind was to preserve the life that she has now at this point. Job was dying. He was sick and suffering. But all she could see was the disappointment on what she thought was the reason for her children's death. And I love what she says here. Women are incredible. I'm not sure if a woman wrote this, most likely a dude, but captured a sentence beautifully. Are you still maintaining your integrity? I love filmmaking and script writing, and if you know me, I eat that up, and I can understand why certain sentences women speak in movies and why certain sentences men speak in movies, and oftentimes women have a broader, more nuanced way of communication than men. We say, how are you doing, honey? Good. That's it. You meant good? That means I don't want to share. That's all that means. But with a woman, she's more intricate with her language, more intentional. You haven't noticed that, maybe because you haven't been married yet, but trust me, she will detail her day. She says, are you still maintaining your integrity? Never listen to a voice that calls you beneath your humanity. Whatever may come, whatever may happen, you've been given the freedom to choose. And it's up to you whether you're going to choose to do good or to do evil. It's up to you. But what I love about this sentence is that it can go both ways. See, if she's using this sentence to antagonize somebody, then it sounds like, why are you even still holding your integrity? But the way that the sentence is structured, if you have a mindset of restoration, it's a challenge. Are you still maintaining your integrity? And sometimes the voice of resentment can be taken into two different ways, but as we're going to learn later, the intention behind why you say things has a lot to do with the way that the words penetrate your soul. So ironically, she says, are you still holding your integrity? Which is exactly what a person that is of faith, a person that has sought out to do good, would ask themselves to continue to be integral. And then there's this other voice, the voice of the judge and the accuser. I'm going to do one voice. Let's just say the judge and the accuser. We're all too familiar with this voice. Anybody familiar with this voice if you've been on Instagram? Nobody's been on Instagram either. Man, you guys are saints. This is the voice that we find the most prevalent on social media, where people comment on other people's decisions and lifestyles and make indictments based on their own personal beliefs without thinking of humanity. It's because you're typing into a screen that you don't think there's a human being on the other side. So you'll make a judgment and you'll accuse them. And isn't it easier to judge? After all, you are perfect. And so the judge has this nuance about himself because he has an elevated view of his own understanding. The judge has the moral high ground, and they are right. And that's final. And they'll let you know that they are right without even taking consideration how you are feeling and the emotional damage that they are creating. Some people are so fixated on being right that they would rather destroy your character than speak deep into your soul. And they may have a bigger concern for being right and you understanding something than destroying who you are. And I think that this is one of those moments in the scriptures that so easily defines for us the voice of the judge. In Job chapter 4, verse 8 through 9, he says, according to what I have seen, those who plow wrongdoing and those who sow trouble harvest it. By the breath of God they perish, and by the blast of his anger they come to an end. This is a man talking to his friend who has just lost his family, who is depressed, who currently has a big misconception about God. And sometimes we can get really frustrated when we communicate to people. And sometimes we talk to people like how the scriptures are written. Very harsh, very poignant. And what I've realized in the faith space is that this is actually something really common. Because you believe what you know to be true. You believe what you know to be true. You think it gives you a passage to tell someone how they are wrong. But time and time again in the scriptures, what we find with Jesus is that he's hardly judging people. He's actually meeting their needs. When he is healing people, they have the misconception that they were born in a treacherous and tragic way because of the sin of their father. And before even engaging in a conversation with the blind man, he saw the need and met their need and taught everyone around them what the truth was. And oftentimes we're more concerned with telling people the truth of what we know, of our understanding of the scriptures, than to meet the needs of people. And the only people that Jesus ever judged were the judges and the condemners and the accusers. Because they would use the law in the scripture to manipulate and abuse people rather than meet their needs. Is the voice of the judge common in your space? See, the voice of the judge will also accuse you when they aren't right. When they don't submit to you being right. Oh, they don't understand me because they're dumb. That's like the first thing you think. Can we just be honest? They just don't get it. And they begin to make accusations as to why people don't get it. See, in their world, in their culture, they believed you got what you deserved. An ancient mindset that still somehow, some way is so prevalent in our society today. You get what you deserve. An eye for an eye. You did that to me, I'm going to give it back to you. And what we see is that this is a common theme in the voices that surround Job. But if that was the case, then evil men who take advantage of other people would not live long, successful, rich lives. And if that didn't satisfy you, if that just didn't fill your palate because, oh, come on, really? I'm sure maybe in their soul, like something was broken inside of them. If that's not satisfactory answer to you, then the God of the universe stepped into the human story, although you did not earn it. If you were to get what you deserved, and if that was what God's mindset was about you, none of us would be here. But the reason why we believe in a hope, the reason why we believe that love can restore, is because the God of the universe would break through the fabric of the universe and do the unthinkable, the unimaginable, to cover all the unthinkable and unimaginable tragedies in your life. So the judge has an elevated view of their opinion, and they will accuse you to be right. Here's another point that he says here in Job 22, verse 7 through 11. You have given the weary no water to drink. So now he's accusing him. This is why this is happening to you. And you have withheld bread from the hungry. But the earth belongs to the powerful man, and the one who is honorable dwells on it. You have sent widows away empty, and the strength of orphans has been crushed. Could you imagine a friend that tells you that it's because you haven't met the needs of infants and orphans? That's why your children died. That's why you're sick. And it's real. I figured to be real with you today and very practical so you understand what I am saying. Because I'm so tired of abusive people taking the church and making it into their circus. And we continuously allow a culture that manipulates the scriptures and turns them into something that they were never. And so he begins to try to trap him and tell him that it's his fault, the reason that things are happening. So in order to justify the bad things that were happening to Job, he accuses Job of doing something he did not do. And I know how it feels to be accused of something you did not do. I have felt so much shame in my past because of things I never did that people began to say I was doing. And oddly enough, it wasn't in high school, outside of church. It was in the church. It was in the faith space that I was accused of things that I never did. And I think that the faith space is filled with too many voices of the judge and too little voices of the servant. Honey, you can come here. I know it's going to be, guys, I'm just letting you know right now, we're going to just be a little bit longer than normally, but this is important. So that's the voice of the judge and the accuser. And you know what's funny? After speaking to the judge and the accuser, they will bind you to guilt and shame that you don't even understand where it came from. Then I'm going to put together the voice of the callous and the offender, both Bildad and Zophar. Look at this in Job chapter 8, verse 4. He said this, in regards to his children died, when your children sinned against him, he gave them over the penalty of their sin. I feel offended. That's why it's the voice of the offender. And there's this tone-deaf nature to the voice of the callous and the voice of the offender. They can't visualize themselves ever being offensive. They think that everyone around them is too sensitive. And they are the only ones that tell people the truth. Have you ever met that person? You just don't tell people the truth. I go, you are offensive. Why do people not want to be around me? Because you offend everybody. It's because I hold the truth. No, it's because you're mean. And I've worked in the construction industry. And I've noticed that the voice of the callous is often in that space. I've worked with a lot of people who are that voice, hard workers, but none of them think for a second that the words are too harsh and rash. They just think, we got to get the work done. Have you ever met that person before? We got to get this done. We got to finish this. It doesn't matter who is in our way. It doesn't matter who you are. I'm going to speak to you bluntly and in your face, and that's it. I can't even recall mornings going into work and saying good morning and getting flicked off and thinking to myself, he must like me. He must really like me. And what I've noticed about the voice that is the voice of callous is often one that is forged with the intent to be abrasive because the world has been abrasive towards them. But the misconception that we find a lot, and especially in men, and I'm talking to men, is that showing strength means brutality and lack of self-control and abrasiveness. But there's a big difference between being a strong person and a brutal person. The reason why this word is even callous is because it gives us insight into how many times that very voice was pressed and pressured. It's calcified because of the harshness that is felt, and they cannot feel sympathy. Look at what he says here. Even if the moon has no brightness and the stars are not pure in his sight, how much less man that a maggot and a son of man that a worm. If you're my friend and you say that to me, you better watch out because I might smack you. But how many times do we choose a language of correction and never a language of love? Because we think love doesn't correct until you are met with the love of God and you realize that it redirects. So when war comes their way, the strength, the voice of power, that's the voice that we want. But let me tell you something about the voice that has strength, not the voice that is calcified or is the offensive voice. Strength elevates the room, not bring people down. If there's a voice in your life that brings you down, they're not for you. Because the voice of God is a strong voice that calls out of you. And by the way, sympathy doesn't make you weak. Sympathy makes you human. We're so ready to just go where we need to go. But I love Jesus because every single time he's got somewhere to be, he never once ignored the need on the way. Strong and mighty and loving. I will get there and meet that need. But meanwhile, there's this road of people who need me. Oh, and by the way, we're going to finish soon, but sometimes it's good to be in church longer than usual. The offensive voice, it provokes you. It's obnoxious. Can you stop? And in your greatest despair, they will call something out of you, but it won't be love. It will be rage. So far, the voice of resentment, the voice of the judge and accuser, the voice of the callous, the voice of the offender. Well, what about the fifth person? Because sociology tells us that the 5 closest people to you are the sum total of who you are. Well, what's that fifth voice in this story? It's the voice of the healer. In Job chapter 32, verse 2, then Elihu, the son of Barachel, the Buzite, I think that's what it is, of the family of Ram, burned with anger. It's not wrong to be angry. It's wrong to do wrong. You can be sad and right. You can be angry and righteous. And we'll talk about that another week. Otherwise, we're going to stay here an hour. And look what he says. He burned with anger at Job because he justified himself rather than God. The voice of the healer will never let a misconception define you or elevate you to a position that does not belong to you. See, oftentimes when we think about the healer, we think that that's the soft guy, the kumbaya guy, the hippie guy. Oh, come on, everybody, let's just get together. But the voice of the healer, it challenges. It meets the person. It inspires. And is concerned about the heart. More than being right. You know how I know that? Because then it says, he burned with anger also at Job's friends because they had found no answer, although they declared Job to be in the wrong. The healer cares more about the brokenness of your soul than to formulate an argument as to why the world is crushing on you. Isn't that what Jesus did? He didn't step into the human story to change the Roman Empire by way of politics. He changed it from the inside out, one soul at a time. And we're going to skip through. And I love this. He says this, I am young in years. Raise your hand if you're young in years. Yeah, yes you are. Come on, love that. He said, I'm young in years. And you are aged. What a kind way to call someone old. Therefore, I was timid and afraid to declare my opinion to you. I said, let days speak and many years teach wisdom. But it is the Spirit in man, the breath of the Almighty that makes him understand. It is not the old who are wise, nor the aged who understand what is right. Therefore, I say, listen to me. Let me also declare my opinion. Don't let anyone tell you that you do not have something to contribute because of your age. God is not in search of young people or old people. God is in search of willing people. And he will speak through anyone he chooses that are willing because they know they're called to serve others. The main difference between the voice of the healer, and we're wrapping up, and all the other voices is actually his intent. Because his intent is to make something new again. To redirect and recorrect. We don't believe God can do anything in our lives because we are broken. And we can't seem to find a way to fix it. So we say, you know what? God made me unfixable. But what we find through the voice of the healer is that he's worried about the wounds of the soul. And not only are his intentions, the voice of the healer checked, but he checks yours. What is your intention? And you know what I found about people who love to be the voice of healer? Is that often they're advocates of God and for God. And sometimes we think like, can you just be an advocate of me? You don't understand. When you are an advocate of God, you are an advocate of everything He's created. Except that your intention to love humanity is not just for the sake of humanity, but because God also loves me, that must mean He loves you. So I will love humanity. I will meet humanity's needs because my motive and my intention is the God of the universe who healed me. You know how I know that there's no such thing as being unfixable? It's because I was broken. No, I was shattered to pieces. And God saw me in my shattered state. And He spoke into my soul through the voices of others who were seeking to heal me. There is a region in the faith space that thinks healing is all about the physical. To get spirits out of people. And that's all that this is about. That's the proof of God on earth. And I would say to an individual, hey, perhaps there's more. Because our body will perish, but our soul will live on. Jesus could heal anybody from anywhere in the world. As a matter of fact, He did in the scriptures. When a woman who was not of the Israelite lineage comes to Him, and because of her faith, He just says, your daughter is healed. They thought she had demons because that was their perception. If something's going wrong in your life, it's got to be that you've invited something really evil into your soul. But I've known way too many good people, too many Christians, generous and faithful, who have experienced the worst things in the world. And isn't it curious that they thought that what she needed to get rid of was a demon, when really what Jesus did was heal her with some words. He didn't even touch her. He touched her soul. And then to skip, there's one other voice. The sixth voice. The one that sociologists don't talk about much. This is the voice of God. If only I could talk to God. God, if only God could talk back to me. Have you ever felt like that? God, where are you? I'm trying to hear you. And sometimes we don't equate that the reason why we can't hear God's voice is because all the voices surrounding us are not advocates of God. They're just trying to rationalize your pain. You know what I love about God is that He is the complete opposite of all those other voices that pull you down. People have a misconception that God is against humanity. They do. Let me tell you something. God calls you to humanity. They say God is a judge. God is a judge. But He judges through eyes of love and mercy. Not of condemnation and hatred. They say He is the accuser. He sends me to hell. But God is actually your biggest advocate to have eternal life with you. They say He is callous and unconcerned, but the scriptures tell us that His spirit is tender and it's moved by compassion towards you. They say He is not concerned about your wounds. Get over it. But God would step into the human story so that we would impose on Him all our hatred and despair and brutally wound Him to tell us that He will heal any wound that we have deep in our soul. And He speaks into the future. And He calls out greatness from out of the darkest of places. Can you stand with me? Because there's something that God says about you. There's something that God says about us, about people, about humanity, about those who are willing. He says this, an all too famous verse For I know the plans I have for you. Plans for welfare and not for evil. I have plans for you, not for evil, to give you a future and a hope. Then you will call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will hear you. You will seek me and find me. When you seek me with all your heart, I will be found by you, and I will restore your fortunes and gather you from all the nations and all the places where I have driven you, declares the Lord, and I will bring you back to the place from which I sent you into exile. Does God sometimes take us into the most difficult places in our life? Yes. But always for us, never against us. Always to create a better future, not a horrible present. Always with the intention to call greatness, to call beauty, to call love out of your soul. And by the way, those voices that I talked about, those voices have been me. I have been the voice of resentment. I have been the voice of the judge and the accuser. I have been the voice of the callous and the offender. I've been those voices, yet God loved me. Do you get what you deserve? No. You get every bit of who God is when you give every bit of who you are to Him. I don't know where you are in your life right now. I don't know what deep despair you may be in. Maybe something happened when you were a child and it's marked you. Maybe something's happening right now and it's made you afraid for life. I can tell you this. I have not lived a long time, but I've lived long enough to see what God will pull you through. And God is with you. He's an advocate for you. Even in the most difficult of moments, even when I've looked for Him in the north and the east, south and the west, and I could not find Him. When I began to listen to the voices that spoke life into me and stopped talking, I heard God's voice. And He gave me hope again. The reason why I'm here this morning is because of God. I'll be honest, I don't understand everything about Him. I just don't. I don't understand why certain things happen in the universe. But I am so sure that everything that He does for the benefit of you, and that He cares for you, and that He loves you. And this morning I want to pray for you. Father, every individual heart that is here, we may not know everything about the scriptures. We may not even know much about ourselves. But will you make one thing so clear to us, is that you are for us, not against us. That you love us and you call us to live the life that you intended. Will you move us towards compassion? In the name of Jesus, amen. Can we give God some praise this morning? Thank you for coming. Next week, I'm sure there'll be something cool that we'll talk about. I got to talk to God about it, hear what's going on. You know, it'd be cool before you come up, Carla? Send me questions. If there's a really good question that maybe is a misconception or a question you have, send it to me. And we may be able to make it next week's topic if it's a really good question. Can we do that?
Right.
Carla, please.
And you can send some of those questions. Since he's talking about questions, you can also send them through Instagram if you don't have Juan's number. Not to plug our Instagram, but House Naples, if you want to go find us and follow us, you can DM some of those questions on there. I'm just coming up here to announce that we have Zion Youth happening on Friday from ages 17 to 24. If you are from those ages, I invite you to come out, join us, and we are having great discussions led by Kethlin every Friday. And if you know anyone between those ages, please invite them out. Bring a friend. I also invite you to bring a friend on Sundays.